Be me, 45 years old. Tenured professor of women's studies at a respectable state university. Spent 23 years of my life dedicated to creating spaces where women could speak without interruption, where our voices mattered, where we could call out problematic behavior without fear. Always saw myself as one of the reasonable ones, the intellectually rigorous ones. Published papers on consent frameworks, workplace equity, the importance of believing women's experiences. Never screamed at men on street corners, never demanded ridiculous things, just wanted fairness and safety. Thought I was building bridges while dismantling harmful structures. Winter semester just started. Noticed something odd in my upper-level seminar. Usual dynamic completely absent. Used to be that male students would occasionally challenge readings, create discussion, sometimes mansplain, but at least engage. Now, the 7 guys in my class of 30 just sit there. They take notes. They turn in. Assignments? They say absolutely nothing. Not hostile silence, not resistant silence, just nothing. One kid, Marcus, used to participate regularly last year in my intro course. Smart guy, thoughtful, would sometimes push back on readings in ways that actually enriched discussion. Now, he just stares at his laptop. After 3rd week of this, I keep one of them after class. Andrew. Seems approachable. Ask him why he's not engaging with the material. He looks uncomfortable, shifts weight between feet. Finally says the readings are interesting, and he's learning a lot. Press him a bit. Say, I notice none of the men are participating. He does this weird smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Says it's probably better if he just listens and learns. Thanks me for my time and leaves before I can ask anything else. Something about that interaction bothers me for days. Mention it to my colleague Richard in the sociology department. Richard is 60, been teaching forever, generally supportive of my work. He gets this look on his face, like he's been waiting for someone to notice something. Tells me he's been tracking enrollment and behavioral patterns for a paper. Shows me his preliminary data. Male enrollment in courses taught by women faculty has dropped 17% over 6 years. In courses specifically about gender, sexuality, or women's topics, male enrollment down 32%. Participation rates among enrolled men down even more dramatically. Office hour visits from male students to female faculty down 41%. He shows me survey data he's been collecting. Anonymous responses from male students across departments. They describe calculating which professors are safe, which classrooms might contain social landmines. One response stays with me, from a 23-year-old engineering student. He wrote that he wanted to take a class on gender and literature because the books looked interesting. Decided against it because he couldn't risk saying the wrong thing, having it interpreted as threatening or ignorant, becoming an example of what not to do. Another one, business major, 20 years old. Described being interested in a female professor's research, wanted to ask about mentorship. Didn't because he'd have to request one-on-one meetings and he wasn't going to put either of them in that position. Position, he called it. Like meeting with a professor was a dangerous situation to avoid. I tell myself this is one data set, one colleague's research, probably not representative. Start paying more attention though. Notice that my teaching assistant, female graduate student, gets way more questions during her office hours than I do. Male students line up to ask her things they could ask me. Bring it up to her, trying to sound casual. She hesitates, then admits male students have told her they feel more comfortable asking her questions. When she asks why, they say things like she seems more approachable or they don't want to bother me. But she knows it's something else. She can feel it too. Start noticing it everywhere once I'm looking. University implements mandatory mentorship program for junior faculty. Department chair quietly tells me that 3 different early career men requested male mentors specifically. When pressed, they gave vague reasons about similar research interests. But their research interests aligned more closely with mine than with the men they requested. The chair looked tired when he told me this, like he's been managing these invisible tensions for a while. Go to department mixer. Try to network with new male faculty hire. Conversation is polite, professional, brief. He positions himself so we're visible from multiple angles. Doesn't step closer when the room gets loud and we can't hear each other, maintains this careful distance. I'm not imagining it. This is deliberate. Contrast it with how he talks to my male colleague later. They're relaxed, laughing, standing close. The ease of it, something starts gnawing at me. Decide to do what I always do when I need to understand something. I research. Spend weeks going through studies I normally wouldn't read. Data on young men's social behaviors, relationship patterns, workplace anxieties. Numbers are staggering. Men aged 18 to 30 reporting romantic relationships down to historic lows. Surveys showing majority of young men now never approach women in public settings. Workplace studies showing male colleagues increasingly refuse to travel alone with female colleagues, won't meet behind closed doors, always keep third parties present. Rates of young men reporting having no close friends up dramatically. Emotional isolation metrics through the roof. Cross-cultural data showing this pattern across multiple Western countries. Find research about men's support groups, the conversations happening there. Themes of fear, withdrawal, calculated risk avoidance. They describe every interaction with women as potential threat to their education, career, reputation. Describe running cost-benefit analyses on simple human interactions. One study includes quotes from interviews with men who've completely stopped dating. 26-year-old says he went on 3 dates in past 2 years. All disasters. Not because of incompatibility, but because he was so anxious about saying the wrong thing that he could barely speak. Another one, 22, describes liking a classmate but never acting on it. His reasoning, even if she's interested, the risk of misreading signals and making her uncomfortable isn't worth what it might cost him. Talks about it like a math equation. Probability of positive outcome versus magnitude of negative outcome. Negative outcome includes being reported, having reputation destroyed, losing educational opportunities. Math doesn't work out in favor of trying. Read about college men who won't study with female classmates alone, won't offer to walk anyone to their car, even when it's late, and parking lot is dark, taught that women's safety is paramount. Interpret that as meaning their presence is potential threat to that safety. Logical conclusion is to remove themselves. Start thinking about my own work, my own words. 23 years of teaching about power dynamics, about believing women, about how men need to recognize their capacity to intimidate and harm. All true, all important, all necessary. But what did those words sound like to 18-year-old boys sitting in classrooms? Boys who were trying to be good, who didn't want to be threats, who took the lessons seriously. We told them to be aware of their power and the fear they could inspire. We told them that women's comfort and safety had to come first. We told them that impact matters more than intent. We told them that they needed to listen, not speak over, not assume. We told them about all the ways their predecessors had failed and harmed. What we didn't tell them was how to actually interact after. Internalizing all of that. Didn't give them a framework for positive engagement, just a detailed map of every possible way they could screw up. Boys who were paying attention, who were sensitive, who actually cared about doing right. Those boys went silent. Withdrew into themselves because that seemed like the safest option for everyone. The ones who didn't listen, who didn't care, they're probably fine. Still approaching women, still taking up space, still confident. We filtered for the worst ones by accident. Made environment where only men who ignore social feedback continue to engage. The thoughtful ones are gone. Sit in my office one afternoon, surrounded by these studies and data sets. Feel something cracking inside my chest. Dedicated my entire adult life to creating a better world for women, to making spaces safer, to amplifying voices that had been silenced. Believed so deeply in the righteousness of this work. Never meant for any of this. Never wanted boys to grow into men who are afraid of human connection. And it never wanted women to inherit a world where decent men have retreated into protective silence. Never wanted to create new barriers while tearing down old ones. Think about my own son. He's 28 now. Hasn't had serious relationship in 5 years. Told me last Christmas that dating seems too complicated, too risky, easier to just focus on work and hobbies. He laughed when he said it, thought he was just being picky. Now, I wonder what calculations he's running in his head. What did he learn from me? from growing up with mother who taught about consent and power and men's capacity for harm. Think about my nephew, college sophomore. Visited last month, mentioned he sits in back of all his classes now, doesn't ask questions anymore. Said something about not wanting to be that guy. I asked, what guy? He shrugged, said I wouldn't understand. Maybe I'm starting to. Find myself crying at my desk, door locked, lights off. Not delicate tears, full body sobs. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to create understanding, not fear. Supposed to build connections, not destroy them. Supposed to make things better. Remember conference I attended 3 years ago. Workshop on addressing male resistance in feminist spaces. We strategized about how to handle men who went quiet in discussions. Interpreted silence as hostility, as fragility, as passive aggression. What if it wasn't resistance? What if it was retreat? What if they were doing exactly what we asked? Making space, not dominating conversation. Listening instead of talking. And we interpreted their compliance as defiance. Keep researching, can't stop now. Find data on workplace mentorship. Senior men increasingly refuse to mentor junior women. Cite concerns about perception, about time alone, about misunderstandings. We fought so hard for women to have access to mentorship and advancement. Now, watching it slip away as men choose protection over support. One survey of male executives, they show 73%. Now uncomfortable with one-on-one meetings with junior female employees. They're not monsters. They're not discriminating out of hatred. They're terrified. Did cost-benefit analysis and decided their careers and reputations aren't worth the risk. Exactly what we taught them to do. Assess risk and respect boundaries. But application creates new form of exclusion. Women can't advance without mentorship and sponsorship. Men won't provide it anymore because environment we created makes it too dangerous. Everyone loses. Start drafting paper about these findings. Want to sound alarm. Want people to understand what's happening. Write about unintended consequences, about overcorrection, about losing generation of young men to fear and isolation. Show draft to close colleague, woman I've worked with for 15 years. She reads it in my office. Expression getting darker. Finally looks up and asks if I'm seriously blaming feminism for men's bad behavior. Tried her. Explain that's not what I'm saying. She cuts me off. Says men choosing to isolate rather than learn to behave appropriately is on them, not us. Says if men are scared, it's because they know they can't get away with things anymore. Says this is what accountability looks like and I should know better. We argue for an hour. She leaves angry, doesn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Realize I can't publish this. Would be professional suicide. Would betray everything I'm supposed to stand for. But how can I not say something? Spend nights lying awake thinking about all of it. Taught thousands of students over 2 decades. How many young men sat in my classes and absorbed messages that made them afraid of themselves? How many women will grow older in a world where half the population has learned to keep careful distance? Remember specific lessons I taught. Unit on microaggressions. Taught students to recognize all tiny ways men dominate space and conversation. Taught about eye contact duration, about standing too close, about unsolicited conversation as potential harassment. Male students taking notes, nodding along, internalizing. Then applying those lessons by avoiding eye contact, maintaining distance, never starting conversations. Perfect students did exactly what we taught. Lesson on workplace dynamics. Discussed how men need to recognize power differentials. Talked about how senior men can't see junior women as mentees without examining their own potential for abuse of power. Meant it as call for self-awareness and appropriate boundaries. They heard it as warning to stay away entirely. Unit on consent. Spent weeks on importance of enthusiastic yes, on how silence isn't consent, on responsibility to ensure comfort. Watched male students become more conscientious, more careful. Also watched them become paralyzed. If anything short of enthusiastic, verbal yes is insufficient. And if asking directly seems aggressive, what's left? Apparently answer is nothing, do nothing, say nothing, want nothing. Safest choice. Think about the language we used. Toxic masculinity, male privilege, patriarchy, rape culture. All real things, all worth naming and examining. But what did it feel like to be a 20-year-old man, hearing that his gender is toxic, that his existence in space is privilege that diminishes others, that he's part of a system designed to oppress and harm? Even if he personally never did anything wrong, he's complicit. We meant it systemically, conceptually. They heard it personally. Some got defensive and angry. Those ones we could dismiss. Others took it to heart. Tried to fix themselves. By removing themselves. Attend required faculty training on preventing sexual harassment. We're instructed on how to avoid any situation that could be misinterpreted. Don't meet with students behind closed doors. Don't communicate after hours. Don't develop friendships that could appear to show favoritism. Maintain professional distance at all times. Realize we're giving these instructions to everyone now. Institutionalizing the separation we said we didn't want. Making it official policy that men and women can't be alone together because the risk is too great. We formalize the distrust. Next class session, watch my male students more carefully. They're not hostile, not checked out, not disrespectful. They're careful. So carefully, painfully careful. They wait for women to speak first. They measure their words. They take up minimal space. They make themselves small and quiet and unobtrusive. Everything we said we wanted. Except we also said we wanted engagement and dialogue and connection. Can't have both. They chose the safer option. Chose silence. After class, Marcus finally comes to office hours. First time all semester. He's so nervous, keeps apologizing for taking up my time, and eventually asks question about thesis he's developing. It's good question. Insightful. Shows he's been thinking deeply about material. Tell him this. Encourage him to develop it further. He looks relieved, but also sad somehow. Thank him for coming. Say, I wish more students engaged like this. He pauses at door and turns back. Says something that guts me. Says he almost didn't come because he didn't want to make me uncomfortable. Says he knows a lot of professors don't want to deal with male students one-on-one anymore. Says he gets it. Says he understands why. Doesn't blame anyone. But also says it's lonely. Trying to navigate college without mentorship or guidance or real connection to faculty. Trying to figure out how to be a good person when every possible action seems fraught, says most of his friends, have just given up on trying. Safer to keep head down, get degree, get out. Leaves before I can respond. Sit there for a long time after he's gone. That word, lonely, echoes. Pull up more research, studies on loneliness epidemic among young men. Rates of suicide, depression, anxiety, all climbing. Social isolation increasing. Support systems, collapsing. We taught them that emotional vulnerability was okay, that they should talk about feelings. Then created an environment where they're afraid to connect with half the population. Women's support systems often include men, friendships, and relationships, and mentorships. Men's support systems historically also included women. What happens when entire gender decides? Safest option is isolation from other gender. Everyone ends up alone. Draft email to Marcus, telling him he's always welcome in office hours. Delete it because what if that's inappropriate? What if trying to encourage male student to visit is somehow wrong? To catch myself in the same calculation they're doing. Risk assessment on basic human professional interaction. We're all doing it now. Semester continues, patterns hold. Quiet men taking notes, engaged women leading discussions, careful distance maintained, exactly what we said we wanted except it feels hollow. Achievement unlocked except prize is emptiness. Give. Lecture on feminist ethics of care. Idea that relationships and interdependence should be centered in moral framework. Talk about importance of connection and community. Male student raises hand for first time all semester. Everyone turns to look. It's that unusual. He asks how we're supposed to build those connections across gender when every interaction is potential minefield. Asks sincerely, not confrontationally. Whole class goes silent. Realize I don't have good answer. Fumble through something about thoughtfulness and communication and respect. Sounds hollow even to me. He nods politely, doesn't push back, doesn't argue. Just accepts non-answer and goes quiet again. Wish he'd argue. Wish any of them would. Conflict would at least be engagement. Attend academic conference in spring. Panel on gender relations in educational settings. Researcher presents data similar to what I've been finding. Young men's withdrawal, isolation, fear of interaction. During Q&A, senior, feminist, scholar stands up. Says, this framing gives too much credit to male fragility. Says, men have always found excuses to exclude women, and this is just new version. Says if men choose isolation over accountability, that's their problem. Audience applauds. Want to stand up, want to object, want to present alternative interpretation. Stay seated. Afraid of how I'll be received, what it will mean for my reputation. Realize I'm doing same calculation the men are doing. Risk of speaking up versus cost of staying silent. Silence wins. Hate myself a little. Fly home feeling defeated. Decades of work, of progress, of fighting for important changes. Can't all be wrong. Protections we put in place matter. Consciousness we raised matters. Voices we amplified matter. But somewhere in execution, something went wrong. Created system that protects by preventing, that ensures safety through separation. Solved some problems by creating new ones. Wonder if there was different path. Way to teach about power, without teaching fear. Way to raise awareness, without raising walls. Way to create accountability, without creating paralysis. Maybe not. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe you can't dismantle system without collateral damage. But collateral is real people. Real young men learning to never reach out. Real young women wondering why men seem distant and afraid. Real connections never forming. Real loneliness metastasizing. End of semester. Grade final papers. Marcus writes brilliant thesis on feminist ethics. Concludes that current framework creates double bind for conscientious men, asked to recognize power and privilege, which requires self-awareness and engagement, but also asked to step back and make space, which requires withdrawal and silence. Can't do both. Men who choose engagement risk being seen as dominating. Men who choose withdrawal risk being seen as resistant. Only winning move is not to play, so they don't. He writes all this carefully, respectfully, backing everything with sources. Concludes that he still believes in gender equality, but doesn't know how to practice it without disappearing. Give him A because paper is excellent. Also write long comments, saying his observations are valuable and important. Say, I hope he doesn't give up on engagement. Even as I write it, know I'm asking him to take risks I'm not willing to take myself. Can't publish my research. Can't speak up at conferences. Can't challenge prevailing narrative. But expect him to keep trying, keep risking, keep engaging. Hypocrisy tastes bitter. Summer break, have lunch with old friend from graduate school. She went into corporate HR. Now VP at major company. Talk about changes we've seen over decades. She tells me about company policies, about separation protocols, about fear. Says male executives now refuse to sponsor junior women. Won't travel together. Won't have dinner meetings. Won't provide opportunities that require one-on-one time. Company brought in consultants. Tried training. Tried incentives. Nothing works because fear is stronger than policy. Says quietly that she thinks we overcorrected. Says she can't say that at work would be career-ending. But watching women's advancement stall because men won't engage feels like losing ground we fought for. We sit in silence for a while, both thinking about paths that led here, both complicit, both trapped. She asks what we could have done differently. Don't have answer. Everything we fought for was necessary. Awareness of harassment, of assault, of discrimination, of microaggressions, all necessary. Accountability, consequences, belief of victims, all necessary. But implementation created climate of fear that's eating everything. Maybe there was no way to avoid this. Maybe this is just cost of progress, temporary adjustment period. But what if it's not temporary? What if entire generation grows up never learning to connect across gender? What if separation becomes default? What if we've created permanent damage? Drive home crying again. Seems to be happening a lot lately. This wasn't supposed to be how it felt. This was supposed to feel like victory, like justice, like better world. Feels like everyone losing. Sit down and write essay I'll never publish. Title it, Men Went Silent Because of Us. Document everything I've found, everything I've realized. Write about intentions versus outcomes. Write about how the most conscientious men were most affected. Write about how we filtered for worse behavior by making good behavior impossible. Write about loneliness and isolation and fear. Write about my own crisis of faith. Write about still believing in equality while recognizing we've created new inequality. Write about not knowing how to fix it. Write about being afraid to even try. Finish essay and save it in folder I'll never open. Too dangerous to share, too important to delete. Testimony to unintended consequences. Evidence of damage we didn't mean to cause. Apology to generation of young men we taught to disappear. Confession that we got it wrong somehow, even while getting it right. Sit in dark office, staring at screen. 45 years old, 23 years of feminist work, countless students taught. Dedicated life to making things better. Maybe did, maybe didn't, maybe both. Think about Marcus and Andrew and all the quiet men in my classes. Think about my son who doesn't date anymore. Think about my nephew who sits in back and says nothing. Think about data showing millions of young men withdrawing into isolation. We told them their presence could threaten, so they left. We told them to listen instead of speak, so they went silent. We told them to be aware of their power, so they became powerless. We told them women's comfort came first, so they removed themselves from equation. Perfect compliance with everything we asked. Catastrophic result we never intended. Whisper to empty office. Men went silent because of us. Saying it aloud doesn't make it better. Doesn't fix anything. Doesn't give me answers. Just names the thing I can't unfeel. The knowing that sits heavy in chest. That decades of righteous work created shadow consequences. That intentions don't prevent damage. That we broke something while fixing something else. And I don't know how to unbroke it. Don't even know if I'm allowed to say it's broken. Career and reputation rest on maintaining that everything we did was right. But sitting alone with research and data and testimonies of isolated young men can't maintain the certainty anymore. Something went wrong. Something is still going wrong. And we did it. Not maliciously, not intentionally, not with desire to harm, but we did it nonetheless. They went silent because of us. And the silence is deafening.